And we are live with another edition of the All Gas No Break Sports Show. I am one of your co-hosts, Nicholas Pavona, joined alongside once again by Andrew Johnson. And Johnson, we have a NBA champion this year in the 2024 NBA season, and unfortunately for you and I, maybe not unfortunate for some Boston fans, the Boston Celtics winning their now record-breaking 18th NBA championship last night after defeating the Dallas Mavericks in 5 games to clinch that championship that they have been longing to win since they won it all the way back in 2008, which doesn't seem too long ago in terms of me being an NBA fan, but it has been a while since the Celtics won their last championship. They got it done last night against the Mavericks, and the Mavericks Cinderella season comes to an end as Boston pretty much dominated the series.
Can I be salty yet, or do I have to wait?
I think we're both salty. Yeah.
So I'm gonna get this out of the way, and this is the only thing really to comment on this. But I know a healthy Knicks team would have won this finals.
I know this.
I know they have a better team in the Pacers series. But there's no crying over spilt milk. I'm not gonna sit here and be up about it. I have to tip my cap to Boston. The healthiest team usually wins the finals, and Boston, for the most part, was the healthiest team. I know they had some problems with Kristaps, but when he is pretty much your third or fourth option, maybe even fifth option in some scenarios, you really wouldn't need him. Especially when he had a great replacement center in Al Horford, who already knew the system, spent several years in Boston. He finally got to championship, so that's great to see.
Yeah. I think Al Horford was like the only Celtic I really was, okay with winning the championship.
No, I mean, I'm okay with Luke Cornett winning a title.
I'm going to stay by my statement of Al Horford being the only person I care about.
Nick Legend, Luke Cornett.
There's too many bad memories when I think of Luke Cornett and on his Knicks tenure. It's not a good thing. However, I mean, him and Tim Hardaway playing this finals keeps the Knicks, in the finals tradition. For Knicks in the finals,
going back since 1946.
It still keeps going strong, and I guess with the way Boston's structured, Johnson. I mean, let's see if they keep Luke Cornett. Who knows? But I think you and I might be of agreement that Boston. It would be really tough not to say that Boston could be right back here in the finals next season.
I cannot say that, and I refuse.
There might be a couple.
Say that.
Well, I don't want it to happen. Obviously, as a Knicks fan, we obviously want our team to make it to the finals. But saying it based off most of their roster is going to be coming back next season. I don't know in terms of free agency who they might lose. I think Derek White.
See,
maybe,
I'm going to
I don't
completely. I don't care about their free agency. I don't care about who's coming back. Boston had historic run where they'd had minimal injury luck this past year.
Right, they faced a lot of teams that had some bad,
and they had the exact
bad injuries, and
so not only did they not really suffer through any injuries outside of the Porzingis injury, the teams that they faced all were heavily injured. So I'm going to go out here on a limb and say that Boston is not going to repeat. I think they are a footnote, not a chapter in NBA history. They're going to be like the last 4 teams, like the Lakers, like the Nuggets, like the Bucks, and they're going to be single champions. And maybe they could win one in a couple of years, but I don't think they repeat.
So who would be their biggest threat in the East? Is the
anyone
Knicks?
That's healthy? A healthy Philadelphia team would beat them. A healthy Bucks team would beat them. A healthy Knicks team.
You think Philly would beat them with that roster?
Listen, a healthy Philly team. Why not? If they gave the Knicks that much trouble, I can't go against it.
I think Philly would have to improve the roster if they're gonna have
That's fine. That's fine.
You can't roll guys like Tobias Harris.
Tobias Harris doesn't get to be there anymore.
Like, that's what I'm saying. Like, they're going to have a different team. So I think depending on what they do in the offseason, then maybe I can make that case for them. And then the rest of the Eastern Conference, I mean, I think it's play and see.
This is obviously as constructed, right?
Yeah,
we have no idea what it's going to look like a month from now.
Yeah, right. Like, free agency is going to come up very sooner rather than later. The NBA draft is just next week as well. So, I mean, the landscape of the NBA is going to change regardless of if this free agency has a lot of great players in it or not. It's going to change regardless. It happens every single year where we see it. We saw what happened last season where, Boston as a team, they made these big time moves in the offseason. They got Drew Holiday after he got traded to Portland originally. They got Kristaps Porzingis in a trade as well. They added all these assets to the team in the offseason that got them to this point in the season. And as you mentioned, they did have some luck. It's kind of ironic that they got some luck along the way when it came to some of these top players getting injured along the NBA postseason ladder. And they had one of the more dominant postseason runs we've seen in recent memory. I mean, they alone had more wins this postseason than, I mean, it's not saying much, but they had more wins than the Pistons had in the regular season, which is really not hard to do considering how the Pistons were terrible this year. No offense to any Piston fans that might be listening on. But for Boston, I think there's not many teams that come to mind to me that would be a big time threat for them not to potentially repeat next season. All depends, again, what happens in this offseason, but Boston's got a really good shot at winning the title next year, in my opinion.
Like I said, only time will tell. I'm still going to count them out because they have Joe Mazzulla as the head coach. I
That's
think
the only thing I don't like
this is a
about it.
Doc Rivers situation right now.
I mentioned
When
that to
Doc
you last
had
time.
again, like Boston, almost 16 years ago. I think 16 years ago exactly to the day.
Yeah.
Because they won the 07-08 championship, right? Because the Lakers won 09,
Yes.
08, 09, then yeah.
Yeah.
So almost identical to the actual day it happened. Doc Rivers, not really a great head coach, but he had so much talent on that team. He had Kevin Garnett, future Hall of Famer. Or he just made the Hall of Fame, excuse me. He has Paul Pierce, future Hall of Famer. He has Ray Allen, Hall of Famer. Rondo, who is a borderline Hall of Famer. So many great players. And he had even good role players at the time, too. Like Kendrick Perkins knew his role. I'm not going to sit here and like, oh, he's so great. But no, he was a good, gritty role player, which that's what you needed. The plethora of talent that Mazzulla has at his disposal. Jaylen Brown, which I think, and I've said this before, he's better than Jason Tatum. Jason Tatum, he had Derek White, Drew Holiday, Kristaps Porzingis, Al Horford. Those 6 players alone, I mean, they would pretty much start almost universally on any team in the league.
Right.
Maybe not so much Al Horford, but those other 5 guys would start on pretty much any team.
Yeah, Horford was more of a situation where he had to start because of the injury.
And Al Horford would probably start on 10 to 15 teams in the league.
Right. No,
I'm not buying Boston to repeat right now. I mean, you could respectfully dicelry, but
no,
I don't think the time is here.
I don't like. I think the only reason they would have repeat is because of Mazzulla. Remember what happened with that Celtics team in 08? They definitely looked to be the favorite in 09, and then the Lakers, they made some moves in the offseason. They got guys like Ron Artest to make sure the Celtics wouldn't repeat, and the Lakers won the title in 09. So teams like that for this upcoming NBA offseason, they're going to make sure that they make these necessary moves to make sure Boston doesn't repeat. Because Boston probably should have more than one ring by now. They should have had plenty of championships.
Boston should have at least 2.
10 years. Yeah, they should at least have 2.
They should have won the finals in what, 21 or 22?
The
21
against Golden State, right?
Was that 21?
That was 22.
22?
I'm going to double check, but I'm pretty sure
they should have won in 22, and the bubble year should have been theirs too.
Yes.
I think they should have at least 2 to 3 rings right now. And
that
I think the real hero of this Boston championship is Billy King.
Yes, and I'm glad you brought up I'm glad you brought up everything about Garnett, Pierce, and Allen, because remember, this all doesn't really happen without Billy King, the former Nets GM, making that trade with the Nets and the Celtics back in all of 2013. Do you remember what that trade was, Johnson? Because I have it right here.
It was Paul Pierce, Kevin Garnett,
yep,
Ray Allen, and it was another player. But it wasn't Ray Allen.
Ray Allen.
Ray Allen was not in that.
Right.
He went to the Heat Miami. Before. Yeah, right. I'm sorry. It was those 2 and 2 players, which I can't remember.
I have the details. It's kind of wild what some of these picks.
I know they gave up 5 first-round picks, right?
So the trade is the Nets got Paul Pierce, Kevin Garnett, Jason Terry, DJ White, the Jet. They got a 2017 first-round pick, which later became Kyle Kuzma, and a 2017 second-round pick, which I don't know who this is. It's some European player that has never played in the NBA. Now, the Celtics, in return, they would get Keith Bogans. Again, I'm going to, any trigger warning for people that get, startled by some of these names. Keith Bogans, Marshawn Brooks, Chris Humphries, Chris Joseph, Gerald Wallace. That's the players that get in the deal. The picks is where this becomes crucial. 2014 first-round pick, not a great pick. 2016 first-round pick, that's Jaylen Brown, who just went out to win Finals MVP this season.
Yep.
And then we saw other picks, the 2017 first-round pick, which became Markelle Fultz. And remember, Johnson, in that draft,
they traded that pick.
They traded that down to number 3. Who did they get at number 3? They get Jason
Jason
Tatum.
Tatum.
And then in 2018, they had that pick. That later became Colin Sexton. So, little known fact, I didn't know Colin Sexton was apparently involved in this type of deal. But yeah, that was a monumental trade. And we knew about this for years and years and years. But not a lot of people, it wasn't culminated until the Celtics finally won that championship. Because people try to compare that to
they won the trade no matter what.
They won the trade regardless.
Sustained success, but now the real icing, the cherry on top of the sundae is the championship.
Right, because this is like people were comparing this to the Herschel Walker trade of the NFL, where he gets traded to the Vikings from the Cowboys, and everyone was wondering why the hell did the Cowboys do this? They get all these first round picks or whatever, and they turn it into a dynasty in the '90s. And this is what people were expecting Boston to do for such a long time. That's why you and I are saying that they should have won 2, maybe 3 rings by now. And they couldn't get it done. They just never had any luck. They kept losing against teams that realistically they should have beat it. And finally, at the end of the day, they got enough luck this season to get it finally done and win that first championship since '08. So not only do they have to thank Billy King for that, but they should also thank the 76ers and the Lakers because of what they did in those 2 drafts alone. The 76ers had back-to-back number 1 picks. They took Ben Simmons and Markelle Fultz. The Lakers have back-to-back number 2 picks. They took Brandon Ingram and Lonzo Ball. Celtics were grateful enough to get Tatum and Brown at pick number 3, even with the trade down from 1 to 3. But it's worked out Boston's way, and now they're NBA champions because of it.
Now, where do we go from here? Who do you think has to go on this team? Who do you think they can retain? Who do you think they don't retain? Who gets traded? Who retires?
I'm of the firm belief Al Horford's retiring.
I would say so too, because
I've been saying that for a while.
He makes the Hall of Fame now, in my opinion, because it's not the NBA Hall of Fame; it is the Basketball Hall of Fame.
Right,
back-to-back championships with the Florida Gators.
I forgot about that. Right,
one of 2 teams in the last 20 years to do it. You have a team this being this year's UConn Huskies, who won this past year and last year. Wins a championship. Boston Celtics, a part of some really great teams for NBA history. The 60-win Hawks, who were dubbed the Spurs of the East 10 years ago, if you remember that, who lost 0-4 in the conference finals of LeBron. I believe he was part of that OKC revival too. Or am I making that up right now?
I'm not 100% sure. I think. Yeah, I'd have to look it up. I'm not 100% sure off the top of my head. I'm also looking at the Celtics.
He was part of that OKC revival in 2021.
Okay, yeah. Okay.
He was on that team. He got traded mid-year. I guess he didn't really start it, but he was there mid-year, and then the next year that's when they started getting over picks, yada yada. But he's still part of that team's history as well. First time around Boston, not really so great. A lot of guys wanted him out of there. He was part of that Sixers team. That were kind of one of the last great efforts in that city, and overall, he had a great basketball career, whether it was in high school, college, the NBA, internationally too. He won a couple bronze medals representing the Dominican Republic. Can you really ask more for some guy that was picked? If you get picked in the NBA, that's kind of what you want, isn't it?
Yeah,
you want a championship. You want to win a couple All-Star games. You want to be paid handsomely, and you want to be remembered fondly by your.
Obviously,
by any team you played on.
Right. Obviously, you'd like to win the title a little bit earlier in your career.
Of course, but this is like
It's a long time coming, and it was worth the wait for Al Horford. I think a lot of people expected him maybe retire last season, and he decided to stick it out one more year. I think, in my opinion, that this is probably going to be it for him. No better way to go out with your career by winning an NBA championship. So I would say that's the first domino that maybe falls for Boston. Now, you got to keep in mind also when you look at their roster, they have their top players that they have are all under contract right now. Guys like Brown, Tatum, Porzingis, and Holiday. But Holiday, keep in mind, has a player option. I doubt he declines that because it's a lot of money that he'd be really, in my opinion, he'd be really dumb to not accept it. The only unrestricted free agents are Luke Cornett, Xavier Tillman, and I'm not even going to try to bother pronouncing this last guy's name because I will butcher it to all hell. The Celtics do have a cap deficit and they're about to be 2.9 million over the second apron of that 67.9 million cap deficit that they have. So they're going to have to make a trade or something in this offseason to make sure that they avoid that happening. There may be the question is going to be now with that also happening is keep in mind Jason Tatum has a player option next season and he's eligible to get the supermax right now. I think that's worth up to like 315 mil, 320, something like that.
It is.
So that's probably priority number one for the Celtics, trying to get him back and make sure that he doesn't, have the option of leaving them next season. But they also have to look at, bringing back Derek White. What do they do about Drew Holiday? I mean, obviously he was a huge factor in them winning the championship this season, but Holiday might be the guy that maybe they have to get rid of, which is crazy to think of, but I don't know where exactly they will go to try to keep everything in place. They're going to have to get rid of a guy like Derek White or Holiday, one of those two guards, to make sure that they have enough money. That way they can keep themselves in the deficit. And then they get, give Tatum that supermax that will keep their roster at bay. And then for the offseason, they're really the only thing they can probably do is just sign vet minimums. That's pretty much it. They can't really do much. So any one of those two guards they trade, they probably just sign a vet minimum guy there. If you lose Al Horford, you probably just sign a vet minimum center to try to replace him. And I wouldn't be surprised if they still win 60 games maybe next season again. Who knows? But it would be tough to just lose a guy like Drew Holiday, considering what the huge because I don't think he got credited enough, for his Milwaukee run when they won the title. He had a great defensive series.
He solidified himself too. I don't know if he's a Hall of Famer, though.
I think I would be crazy to say, but I think if he goes to another team, let's say if it's not Boston, let's say if he goes to another team and helps them win a championship,
he has
that would
time
definitely
too.
solidify it. Yeah, he's still very. What is he about? He's 34. He can still get it done.
Good years left.
Yeah, he's still got a couple more years left in him, so he could definitely still get it done. I just don't know if it's gonna be on Boston next season. I don't know if they would really, I think they're in the point with him having the player option and him gonna accept it for sure. I think he probably becomes the odd man out, but maybe it's Derek White. I don't know who out of the two that they would really be saying to themselves, you know what, he's more accessible to let go of. We have, guys off the bench like Peyton Pritchard that showed out kind of a bit in this postseason. Maybe we'll be okay with just starting him. He's not more of a defensive guy like Holiday is, but he plays more Derek White standard, so maybe Derek White's the guy that goes out. I don't know. Well, I think Boston has an interesting offseason regardless of who they get rid of between those two, in my opinion. But they'll be able to sign veteran minimums, guys to 1 year, $2 million, $3 million contracts out who want to try to win another championship next season.
It's just going to be very strange seeing whatever the outcome of this NBA season is.
Now, on the other side of things, where does Dallas go from here, Johnson, after losing this final? They had a very good run to get there. The finals itself did not go their way. They kind of, felt inconsistent at times. I felt like Luka mostly was the only consistent player they had this entire series, and that really doesn't come to a surprise. But we were hoping guys like maybe Kyrie Irving, maybe some extra motivation going into the series. He just had a tough series overall shooting wise, and now the Dallas Mavericks go into an offseason where what much can they do, because they also have salary cap issues that they have to figure out.
I don't know what Boston does, because this was Kyrie's chance to step out of LeBron's shadow. Yeah. I don't know what Kyrie does.
Right.
I don't know, because this is his chance to step out of LeBron's shadow, and he puts up 14 points per game over the course of 5 finals games. He really only has one decent game. Doesn't hit a 3-pointer until I think game 3 at home. This was his chance to finally, be the Kyrie Irving of Cleveland, dropping 30, 35 points a game on a regular basis in the finals, and he blew his opportunity. I think Dallas should move on from him.
Do you think they should get rid of him this season?
I think they should, because
this was the first year of this new contract, right? Or second year?
I think it's his second year on the team. But I think it's the first year of his new contract. But he's going to be 33 years old next year. He's not getting younger, and I think you have to prioritize Luka. Is this a guy that's going to... Do you think Dallas, with their current roster construction, can make it back to the NBA Finals?
I don't think they can because I think the Western Conference, you look at the West itself, you have Denver, who's going to be back there next season. You have Minnesota, who, in my opinion, is going to be back there next season, even though they struggled to end the year. Those two alone, that's a problem to begin with. The other teams in the West is where it gets tricky because I don't know where their offseason is going to, deter from. I think OKC, depending on what they're still very young, but if they take another development year, maybe they'll be another top threat in the West again next season. And then you have the other teams like the Clippers. We don't know what their offseason entails. The Suns. We don't know what their offseason entails.
Again, these
The
are
Lakers,
all
the
the old
Warriors.
man teams, though.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Like, we don't
So
know
I
where
don't.
these teams
It's
go
not.
from.
I don't think any of these teams realistically can contend next year for a championship. All those ones you just mentioned. I
I
think the
think it's
Warriors are
really,
done. I think the Suns
yeah.
are done. I think the Lakers are done for now. What I do see them doing is committing to the tank, and a team like Houston takes their place. Sacramento goes back in the playoffs. Maybe
Houston,
you
yeah.
have San Antonio take the leap a little bit early for them, but maybe they take a step towards that. There's
They
going to
get
be a
someone in free
shift.
agency, yeah.
Yeah, there's going to be a shift in power in the Western Conference, and I think all these current traditional contending teams are going to take a step back next year.
I do like
And Dallas does
Houston.
not.
I
Yeah,
think they're a very sneaky team for next
yeah.
season.
Houston sounds good. Houston's probably gonna be great. I've been a big fan of Sangoon. I've
They
said
almost made
that
the
from day
playoffs this
one.
year.
Yeah, listen, they made that late playoff push, and West was a bloodbath, and they have a realistic chance next year because it's not like unless they heavily regress with a team full of rookies and second year players and third year
Right.
players, it's going to be very hard to see them actually lose. Does that make sense?
No, I see what you're getting. It's really where it comes down to Ime Udoka because obviously he could have been the NBA champion coach this season for the Celtics, and now he's on a different team after all his off the court issues. But now he has this young, Rockets team where you have other vets like Fred VanVleet. I mean, they should on paper be a team to be in playoff contention again next season. And who knows, maybe they're like the Thunder. Because remember what happened with the Thunder last season? They were a team that barely made the playoffs. They won a play-in game. They missed out on the playoffs itself, but then they took that next step and they were the number one seed this past season. So the Rockets, I'm not saying they were going to be the number one seed next year, but they could take that next step and be, in that 4 to 5, 6 range of making the playoffs.
Like a wise man once said, aka Kevin Garnett, anything is possible.
Right. So I think for terms of Dallas, I think your idea of Kyrie is not a bad thing because if you look at his contract, remember, keep in mind, he has a player option next season, and then he's an unrestricted free agent in just 2 years. So he's, or maybe 3 years actually. I think that I'm reading the contract wrong. So next season will be he'll have one more year after that, which is the player option, and then he'll be the unrestricted free agent in 2026, 2027. So I think constructive wise, I don't think it's gonna be enough for the Dallas to win because all they can really do in the offseason is sign guys on vet minimums because they're paying so many people. I think one of the big things they do need to do is get rid of a guy like Tim Hardaway Jr. I think he had a really bad series. He's getting paid a lot of money and I think he got
He
taken
didn't
off.
produce.
He didn't produce and
He
I
was a
think they
complete
benched him.
liability this playoff. Yeah, he did get benched. You're right, because when he would come out, he'd come off the bench for 5-10 minutes. That would be it. And Tim Hardaway Jr. for the longest time was a productive NBA
He was
player.
a decent starter, yeah.
He was a decent starter. He was a good bench player. He had many productive. He was even getting. Oh man, this is gonna sound crazy. He was getting a lot of praise when he was on the Knicks too. I know the Knicks kind of screwed him over, if you want to say that. They trade him away not once but twice. He goes
Yeah.
to Atlanta. He reinvents himself. The Knicks bring him back, and then within 2 seasons again, the Knicks send him away. He had a lot of six. He was a six-man of year candidate probably for his entire career when he was coming off the bench.
Right.
He was always a six-man of the year threat. So, uh, great career, but it's gonna have a sad ending. And he, for a guy that's only 31 years old too, so it seems like he has a lot left in the tank. But maybe it's proving to be too much already for him. So maybe he has to kind of take that back seat. Maybe he does have to be that permanent six man. Maybe he's not a starter anymore. But
Yeah,
I would love for Dallas fans to chime in on this.
because look at Dallas's salaries going to next season. They're paying two guys 83 mil combined. That's Luka and Kyrie. Then you still have Tim Hardaway under contract for one more season next year. So Maybe they get rid of him this offseason. That way they don't have to pay the last year of the contract, the 16 mil. But then they're paying. Remember, they got PJ Washington at the deadline. He's getting paid 15 million next season. Daniel Gafford, another guy they got at the deadline, he's getting paid 13 mil. Then they have Maxi Kleber, who's still getting paid 11 mil for the next 2 seasons. And then they gave Josh Green a contract where he's getting paid next season $12 million. So his contract's going up after he only got paid $4 million this season. So Dallas has an interesting offseason where they're going to have to make a lot of moves and just get rid of some salary cap.
This is how I look at it. Kyrie is not worth the. He's a great player, but he's not worth the contract right now, right?
You could definitely get some draft picks.
Yeah, you get draft picks.
Produces.
I think you should trade Kyrie, get rid of Tim Hardaway Jr. You keep Lively, you keep Gadford, you keep I would say PJ Washington, Derek Jones, Josh Green. You get rid of those kind of.
Well, Derek Jones, keep in mind, I don't mean to cut you off. Derek Jones, keep in mind, is one of their guys that's on an expiring contract, so they have to sign him back.
Yeah, I think they got to bring him back first and foremost. Second of all, you have to retain those young guys. Third of all, I think you have to cut some of those veterans on the bench too. As much as I like Maxi Kleber and Seth Curry and Rashawn Holmes, I think you got to get rid of them. I know they didn't play a lot. They only played spot minutes throughout the year. Maxi Kleber getting a little bit more burn in the playoffs, but you have to commit to not the youth movement, but the younger side of things, right? Because you already have good players on the younger side. So you don't have to play a bunch of 20-year-olds. No, because you have Luka, who's 24. You have PJ Washington, who's 25. Gafford, 25. Derek Lively, not even 20 yet. Josh Green, who's 23. You have players that are good and young at the same time. So they don't have to really commit to a full youth movement, but I think it would be smart of them to kind of just lean towards that, if that makes sense. Because Luka is already mature enough that he can be the guy, right? We know he can be the guy. He averaged almost a 34-point triple-double this year, almost James Harden territory. But his defense was kind of James Harden has too, so that's the downgrade there.
Yeah.
But I think they should build around Luka because even though he's on the younger side, he's a proven and capable leader. And they should cut some of the older guys.
I think it all comes down to this. Like, let's say they get rid of Kyrie. I think it would also depend on what do you do in the offseason. Like, who are you trying to target in this? Like, I think right now, who would be, like, in your opinion, the biggest free agent? Is it LeBron? Probably, because I would assume he's going to be a free agent.
LeBron would make any team an instant playoff contender.
Right. I'm saying, like, I think he's probably the free agent number one, and then what is it? Paul George is number two?
PG-13, but he's not a guy that you should build your team around.
Right, no, I'm saying, I think right now, LeBron and him are probably the top two free agents, but LeBron is clearly number one. So, if Dallas were to do that, are they just going all in and try to get LeBron to get there? Because he has been rumored to go to maybe Dallas this offseason.
Here's the thing. Even though he's a restricted free agent, you got to talk about Tyrese Maxey. Even if you can't get him, you have to make the Sixers pay the maximum value for him.
I think any team should do that regardless.
Yeah, regardless of him. Paul George, like I said, player option. Pascal Siakam is interesting because he's on the older side. But he's a proven playoff contender. He could turn it on the playoffs.
Yeah. I just feel like he's going back to Indiana. I would be very surprised.
Never say never. Never say never.
Yeah, you're probably. Yeah, I shouldn't. Say it's set in stone. It could potentially not happen, but I just feel like that was like kind of like a match made in heaven type of thing, where like it kind of worked out for the Pacers. So I wouldn't be surprised if he goes back there, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he goes.
And this is gonna sound messed up because I'm a Knicks fan, but OG Anunoby is a top 5 free agent this class.
Yeah, and he's a guy that I'm hoping the Knicks can bring back. But
from a fit option, from a complete fit option for if you have a Dallas Mavericks, I think Pascal Siakam would fit, LeBron would fit, OG would fit. Even though a guy like DeMar DeRozan, I mean, do you play him at guard or forward, though? What does he want? Like, because he doesn't really need the ball.
If I had to say, I'd say he again. Remember, folks, this is all hypothetical. If they got rid of Kyrie, I don't know if they do or not. But let's say they did get rid of Kyrie, you could put DeMar at the 3. I think Josh Green kind of showed you something in this offseason, in this postseason, where you could start him at the 2. Even Jaden Hardy you could start making the case maybe because he started to play a little bit better for Dallas as well. You could make the case for one of those two guys being your number 2 guard behind with Luka at point, and then you have a vet like a LeBron or a DeMar at the 3, and then who knows what you do at the 4, and then you have that number 5 at Derek Lively. You already have it. You could start PJ Washington at the 4 if you want to keep him there, sure. So I think that's fine. I think they just need to get if they got rid of Kyrie, I think a small forward would be the necessity for that team. But there is kind of like a similar offseason with Boston where they don't have much cap and they have to probably make a move or two to even try to sign some vet minimum guys. And even then, do they maybe start listening to inquiries if they want to really realistically trade Kyrie away? If that is a thing that happens, I don't know.
I think a sign and trade for one of these teams are going to make the most sense. That you're going to see a couple sign trades, and I've said this before because there's a lack of salary cap in the NBA, and you desperately need it because all of these guys deserve these deals, right? You have 4th and 5th starters on teams making $25-30 million a year, but the cap just simply won't provide that. You have teams going to cap hell. No one can really get paid efficiently. You're not really having exciting free agencies like you've seen the last 20 years. And that's because there's no real cap room. So if you add another team, you add Seattle and Vegas, you open up another $300 million in cap, which you can see all these guys like, oh, well, I'm going to go play in Vegas now, or I'm going to go play in what do you call it, wherever it is, because they want to win a championship and they want to get paid. And it's going to open up a lot more when you have these teams. But I think for the time being, you're not going to see a lot of true signings. You're going to see a lot of sign and trades.
Right. Yeah, I mean that's the world we live in. I mean, every team is pretty much trying to build a super team, right? They're not, we haven't really seen the last couple of NBA champions realistically be, a team that's one guy and then they have a bunch of role players. I think Denver maybe is
Denver
the only
was not
one,
a super team, and I would say Milwaukee's not a super team. So it's been 50-50.
I'll give you Milwaukee too, yeah.
Yeah, so I think over the last couple of years,
because
Golden State was still a super team. Whether people want Clay was still decent at the time. He was still he was probably towards the end of his peak. Draymond was still producing. Steph Curry was Steph Curry, and obviously Boston this year was a complete super team. That was not a dynamic duo, even a trio. It was more like a dynamic duo, and then the other 3 guys could probably be a trio somewhere else.
That's the point. That's what it was. Like Tatum or Brown could have a bad game, and all they would need is Derek White or Drew Holiday or Porzingis to just score like 15, 20 points or whatever, and they're fine because they have so many role players.
Even Hal Horford is capable of scoring 15 points if needed. He's not going to do that every night, but if needed, he could do it.
Right. So, I don't know. I'm intrigued by this offseason because I know for a fact everyone's going to be gunning to try to beat Boston and make sure they don't repeat. And the free agents that we have upcoming is where it gets tricky because we don't know what LeBron's doing. We don't know what Paul George is doing. We assume that they're probably going to test free agency, but maybe I'm wrong. You have guys like Harden's a free agent. Siakam might be a free agent, depending on if he leaves Indiana or not. Clay's going to be a free agent. Try to look at other free agents that are here. OG Anunoby we talked about earlier. We'll see if the Knicks bring him back. This is a decent free agency class. It's not maybe top heavy as it has been the last couple of years, but there are still some very reliable names in this free agency that could definitely help teams win the championship next year and make sure Boston doesn't repeat. I'm trying to think. Was the Lakers the last time we had a repeat in the NBA?
Golden State.
Golden State, right? Yeah, I don't know why.
Golden State, of course. How can you forget about the Golden State dynasty that ruined many years of our lives? The Golden State Cleveland mega rivalry for pretty much
I don't know why
the latter half of the 2010s, which, and this is going to sound controversial, I hate when people say the 2010s was LeBron's era when Steph Curry has more rings than him, or just as many rings in that same amount of time frame. So
I try to blot that out of my head, and I completely forgot about that. I don't know why I didn't think of that to begin with. So thank you for correcting me on that, even though I'm kind of mad you corrected me on it because I like I said, I try to forget.
I'll never forget. It was on July 4th, 2016, where Kevin Durant ruined the NBA for 5 years.
Yeah. Oh, well. Before we go into what we're going to look at this upcoming offseason, I mean, we'll look at the odds for NBA champions next season. The Celtics right now have that. I'll go with, let's see, what's this number? We'll go with I don't know, top 7. Celtics are number 1, Denver is number 2, Minnesota's number 3. The Thunder and Bucks are tied for Thunder, Bucks, and Dallas, I should say, are all tied. It's 4, 5, and 6. The Knicks are 7,
Lucky
and
number
then Phillies
7.
after that. Yeah, so the next would
Lucky
be the
number
last team.
7 for the Knicks.
Yeah.
Would have guessed.
But again, this all is going to change regardless because of how this offseason goes. So who knows if these odds stay the same? But the offseason definitely will provide us with a lot of questions and scenarios of what happens next season. But that all starts, Johnson, next week with the NBA draft. But before we potentially dive into that, or just give a quick preview of next week's NBA draft, any favorite memory you have of this NBA past season? We did this last year, I remember, and we talked about a couple moments. Was there any favorite moment that you had in this past season?
This season was pretty, do I dare say unmemorable? It was a very forgettable season.
Honestly, I felt like there was so much more memories last season. Like I remember, like I know, like this year we had like that LeBron thing on the sidelines with Jeannie Buss and the other woman where he said "Happy International," not International, sorry. He said something about Women's Day. I forgot what it was.
International, you had it right. I think
Was
it's
I right?
Internationals. Yeah.
I don't remember the name. I forget the. Apologize for the name of the holiday, but that was like a meme going on for so many days and like pretty much weeks. I know that was like maybe a funny moment of the season, I guess. The only a really good memory I have of the season is the game that you and I went to for the Knicks and the Pacers, game 2.
That's a personal memory, though, too.
Personal memory. I guess that maybe that's not as good of a memory.
Jalen Brunson scoring 60. How about that? We count that?
Was that the game against the Suns, right?
Yes. He also did it again. He almost had 60 against
Dallas
too.
San Antonio. Yeah.
Yes.
Because I remember against San Antonio, I thought they were going to win that game, and then Wembanyama hit like a crazy shot at the end, and that pretty much ended it.
You know what I'll say? The most memorable moment, speaking of Wembanyama, is when I think he scored 11 points in like 60 seconds by himself.
Oh yeah,
I forgot about that. I think this is going to be his emergence this season. That's what's going to be known for years from now. Just the absolute craziness that Wembanyama, dare I say, mania, has hit the States now, where he's the guy, no matter what at this point.
Yeah. I mean, Wemby's definitely looking to take that next step next season. I'm sure he definitely will. And the Spurs, if they add pieces around him, maybe the Spurs get a play-in spot next season. Yeah, I like you said, I think there's not many as memorable moments as we had, per se last season. But it was still, I would say it's still a good overall season regardless.
Oh yeah, I mean it was a fine season, but just for the lack of memorable moments, there was no drama like the Kyrie drama or the James Harden fat suits or the Kevin Durant foot on the line. This whole playoff series, is every series really in general. Outside, I think Nuggets, Wolves, Knicks, Pacers, Knicks, Sixers. Again, that's maybe my bias, and I really don't care.
No, you're not the only one. I think a lot of people thought that
maybe Clippers, Mavs was pretty good. That was a good series because they almost had that insane comeback and ended up winning the series anyway after being down 0-2.
There was, because I remember that there was that game. I think it was. I know we talked about it a couple weeks ago. I think it was game 3 or 4 where Dallas was down like 20, and it looked like they were done, and they came back and won the game, and they went up 3-1. I think in the series when they won. So maybe it was game 4. That was a good series. The Knicks, a lot of people said the same thing. The Timberwolves and the Nuggets series was great. The Knicks Pacers series was great. The Knicks Sixers series was great. But all the other series, we had a game 7 in round 1, and even I felt like that wasn't, a lot of people were talking about that. And that's like
because it was Cavs Magic. Because every other game was like, oh, it's a blowout. It's a blowout.
It was literally the home team won every game of the series.
Not exciting, and it wasn't even in dramatic fashion. It's not like, oh, they're going to hit a buzzer beater or it came down the wire. No, and the game 7 wasn't that exciting because Orlando blew such an insurmountable lead,
Right. Yeah,
leading I think by
that
over
was bad.
20 points, and then they just blow it. Again, young team, but not just an exciting season. And I'm a basketball guy. I mean, I've said that multiple times that this is my favorite sport, and college basketball was more exciting this year again. And whether it is the unpredictability, whether it's just March Madness, but uh, obviously the style of play is very different, and the quality of the game of the NBA is way better because they hit high percentage shots. They're professionals and they're going to pretty much run anyone else out of a gym from any other league. But it was just something about the NCAA this year where you got good games. You got games that went back and forth all the time. Where the NBA was like up 15-point lead, and I guess that's it. Now we're gonna start pulling our teams, and we're gonna start, resting up for the next game. We're gonna load manage. It hasn't been enjoyable the last couple of years.
Yeah. Well, I hate to leave that as sour note, but we'll conclude the show, Johnson. At least by previewing our show next week, as a lot of people know, and you and I both know. Next Wednesday, if I'm doing my math correctly, yes, it is next Wednesday. Next Wednesday is the NBA draft. It usually takes place about a week after the NBA Finals ends, and that is the case for this year's upcoming NBA draft, June 26th. Is it still at the Barclays Center, Johnson?
It is.
Okay, so it's still at the Barclays Center, but
I'm almost positive it's the Barclays Center.
I
But
will say it is a different variation of the NBA draft this year. The first time that we have 2 days of the draft. We'll have round one on Wednesday, round two on Thursday. So there is a first for this upcoming NBA draft. Anything you're looking forward to this upcoming draft? I know that the Hawks, they have the number one pick. There's been trade rumors with them regarding guys like players like DeAndre Murray and Trae Young. They're sticking
here's
at
my
number
take
one,
on the
but
NBA draft. They're saying it's one of the weakest NBA drafts of the last 10 years.
yeah, which doesn't really, which kind of, I guess
Which I think
maybe
is
ties
going to
into
be
the
a
bad NBA
storyline.
season.
This is
Okay.
going to be a storyline going forward. And here's my positive spin on this: that these players are going to be so scorned by saying, "Oh, this is the worst NBA draft class of all time." And you know what? It does. Every draft class has the potential of being the worst draft class. We were told that 2019 was going to be one of the best draft class of all time. Who's the best player out of that? Zion, the guy who can't stay healthy. John Morant, the guy who can't stay unsuspended. Or RJ Barrett, the guy who's finally finding consistency his fifth year in the league on another team that he's already been traded. Is it oh man, who's the point guard from Cleveland? He's Darius
Garland.
Garland,
Yeah.
Tyler Hero. I mean, granted, these are good players, but are they elite players?
No.
Maybe Zion's an elite player when he's
Zion.
healthy.
I
Maybe
mean,
Ja's elite when he's
I mean,
healthy
you
or
saw
when he's on the court.
you.
But
Oh yeah.
I mean, listen though, the best trait is availability. So
Right.
this one gonna go with this NBA. These prospects. These prospects are international players. You could say the first three picks are going to be international players, two from France and maybe Topic from Serbia. But his measurables and his camp was lying about a couple of things, whether it was height, his wingspan, his age, whatever. Then you're going to see a couple of Kentucky guys. Kentucky guards are always good, no matter what.
Yeah.
Now, take that for yourself. A drafted Kentucky guard is good. Can you tell me the last drafted Kentucky guard that really wasn't that good in the first round? I think you'd be hard pressed to find it.
Yeah, I can't think of one off the top of my head.
Because think about it, in the last decade,
What?
you
Maybe
have,
one of the Harrison twins.
and even them, they were serviceables. Was
They
Andrew
were.
Harrison taken? They weren't taken in the first round. Though.
No, they were probably second round picks, but
They were mid to late
that
second
was
round
like-
hit.
I was trying to think of like any Kentucky like point guards, and like that was like the only like they were decent, like weren't great. Like I know like
You
John
think about it,
Wall, yeah,
John Wall, Emmanuel Quickly. Again, not all these guys are created.
SGA, Rondo,
Rondo, Tyler Hero was Kentucky,
De'Aaron
wasn't he?
Fox, Tyler Hero. Yes, he was.
Yeah, so you have all these Kentucky guards taken in the first round. They usually turn out to be pretty good, right? If there's anything you'd say, draft a Kentucky guard, usually pretty good. So you have Reed Shepard and Rob Dillingham, both going to be taken in the first round in the lottery. Then you have a couple of UConn guys that just come off the national championship, Donovan Kling and Stefan Castle. I mean, they weren't. Yeah, thank God, right? No offense, but he has dominated the Big East the last couple of years.
Yeah,
Then you have the seniors too, right? You have the seniors or the upperclassmen. You have guys like, again, Tyler Kolek,
I can't.
Evan Carter.
I was going to say, I can't wait to see Devin Carter get drafted. This is another guy
Dalton
I'm very
Knecht.
happy not to
You
see.
have these seniors, right, that are from these great programs, and they've done great things over the last couple of
Kyle
years.
Filipowski from Duke as well, the
Yeah,
sophomore.
you're right.
Yeah.
So they have a lot of potential. It's not like, oh yeah, you're getting the 18. You're not getting
You
Kobe
have
Bryant, right? You're not
Zach
getting the
Edey's in the draft,
generational.
too.
Yeah, Zach Edey, another good upperclassman. That his, you know what? He looks pretty good now that he's doing the combine and everything.
Right.
Baylor Shireman's another guy I kind
God,
of like.
I hated him so much. Get
Yeah,
it?
listen, and you know what? Because you're a real college hoops fan, that you could recognize that some of these guys,
Yeah.
these multi-year guys, these juniors, these seniors, even the sophomores, the Jalen Brunsons, the Josh Harts, the Mikal Bridges, these guys that stay in college for more than 1 year, and they're not looked at again. Those are all Nova guys. They're
Yeah, I
not
was going
looked
to
at
say, you
as
just
being,
named all the Nova people.
because that's what all these guys, they had the same thing against them, and they said, oh
No, but
well, they're kind of,
that's what UConn's kind of doing this season. Some of their players stayed back because they
yeah,
want
they
to
stayed back.
they want a three-peat.
They want, yeah. I mean, listen,
And
it's going to
Hurley did the
happen.
same. I mean, he could have had the Lakers job, but he said no. I want to get a three-peat.
I don't think they three-peat. That'd be unheard of. That's really uncharted
I don't
waters.
think so, but I mean, it'd be really tough not to pick them as the favorite right now going into the season. But again, hopefully for our case, that's not the case.
But yeah, again, all these guys that they're kind of saying, oh, you know, they're whatever, but they were multi-year guys, and they turn out to be a really above average to even star level NBA players.
Right.
And it's just because a lot of these people can't, dare I say, the NBA draft is a gamble, right?
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the day, this is a really big gamble, and that's what people look for. They're looking for the next LeBron, they're looking for the next Kobe, they're looking for the next Michael Jordan, that 17, 18-year-old prospect that you could have on a franchise, that you could have in your franchise for the next 15 years if you get them and they come, firing out the gate.
Yeah, we
That's
spoke about it earlier.
And that's why they don't like these 22-year-olds. They don't like these 21-year-olds because they figure, okay, well, how much more can you develop? And they'll end up taking guys that don't really have great stats coming out of college because it's all about potential. How many of those potential picks actually hit in the first round? Or in the first, I should say, in the lottery, in the first 15 picks? How many potential picks do we see every single year and go, oh, well, he's a bust now?
Yeah.
How many Marquise Chris's? How many Dragon Benders? Many Anthony Bennett's? How many of these guys that are being taken off their potential and only their potential? And now it's like, well, we can always try again next year. Why don't you take the guys that already performed at a high level,
right,
either in the Euro League, for example, a guy like Sengun. Another guy's like, oh well, he's from Europe, and he's a little bit on the older side. We know he dominated the Turkish league, but he kind of went overlooked. I feel like that's going to happen again with a lot of these guys. We'll be looking in a couple of years, like, how did we get these guys? The Spurs did this for years. They were one of the only teams that would take guys that were 21, 22 years old, and then a year or two from now, they'd be churning them out like a machine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I feel like the best example of that was that Bennett draft, because I think it's regarded as one of the worst drafts in history, and they have one great player in that draft, and that was Giannis. And Giannis didn't get picked to 15. And remember when Bennett got drafted?
He was definitely a potential guy, but I want to point out 2019, these guys that were freshman and sophomore. Let's go to 2019. DeAndre Hunter, what's he doing right now? He's a sophomore. I can't tell you what he's doing. Jared Culver, potential.
Was he on the Lakers last season, DeAndre Hunter?
If you have to think about where he is, he's still a Hawk, and he's not getting minutes.
You're right. He is still a Hawk.
Jackson
he was
Hayes,
drafted
right?
by the Lakers, right? That's right. Yeah.
The king of potential, Cam Reddish. Cam Johnson was a senior, so I'll let that go.
Jared Culver,
Romeo Langford, another guy. Sekou Doumbouya, another guy. Let's go back to 2018 now. All potential. DeAndre Ayton potential. Marvin Bagley potential. Luka was passed up because they say, oh, well, he's European, whatever. Two potential guys hit. Jaren Jackson, Trae Young. Mo Bamba, potential guy. Wendell Carter Jr., potential guy. Colin Sexton, potential. Kevin Knox, potential. And who do they pass up on? They passed up Mikal Bridges.
SGA.
You have SGA the next, and then you have Miles Bridges, which he was okay, but he's got off the court issues.
Could have even taken DiVincenzo.
Listen, there's a lot of these guys. Yeah, Dante DiVincenzo, another guy that was kind of passed up on.
I don't like Grayson Allen, but Grayson Allen is not a bad player.
In 2017, potential guys again: Markelle Fultz, Lonzo Ball, Josh Jackson, Jonathan Isaac. Your top
Markel
six
Fultz was the most potential player
of all
in,
time.
I think, of all time because he barely played in Washington and he had an injury going into that draft. And the Sixers said, you know what? It's okay. We're still embracing the tank. We're going to take him anyway. And that just was so bad. But there was just no reasoning behind it. Everyone, like, if they had taken Lonzo, that's a different story. They had no reasoning to take Markel Fultz. I could never understand it in my entire life. I still
Yeah,
don't
because the
understand it.
NBA is based on as
And
much as
Fultz now, is a solid player. Don't get me wrong, but
yeah,
at the time, there was no reason for him to be the number one pick.
potential players: Frank Ntilikina, DSJ, Zach Collins.
Please don't remind me about that, man.
But that's what I'm saying. They
I
take
know, I
these
know.
guys that are potential players, and even in the later rounds, I remember guys like when Henry Allenson got drafted, and they take Justin Patton, and they leave Kyle Kuzma and Derek Wright to
I
fall
I
to the
really thought
bottom of
Justin
that
Patton
round.
was going to be him.
I never did because I saw him play.
I did
I saw
too,
a lot
but
of these guys play in
I thought he'd
college.
be a good shot blocker. I knew like he would be. I didn't
And
think he was
again,
gonna be
the
great. I just thought
NBA
he'd be a
is a
good like
crapshoot because
defensive
you're never
all
really
around
going
player.
to nail it every single time. That's just how it is.
Yeah, it's not feasible.
But when you have players on a consistent basis that are getting drafted between 22 to like I would say 20 to 30, and that turns out to be better or equal to the picks between 1 to 10, you have to look in the mirror at some point.
Yeah.
But again, the NBA draft, I'm going on a huge rant now towards the end of this. It's just always been a potential casino
Well,
at this,
well,
and
keep in
I
mind,
hate it. So that's why I hate when people say, "Oh, this is gonna be the worst draft ever." How do you know? You haven't even seen half these guys play.
right?
We do every single year. Oh yeah, this is all based off potential, and these teams are gonna be great because they're getting this guy. And how many times do you see these guys end up being a bust? Happens more often than not.
I think the best thing that's going into this draft, and I'll leave it with this. I think the best thing that's going into the draft is we don't know who the number one pick is going to be. I think that's the most unpredictable thing
Yep,
that we have going into it, which makes the draft, even in my
first
opinion,
time in
better.
probably about 5 or 6 years.
Right? Maybe since the Fultz draft. Do you dare say? Maybe since
Yeah,
then. Who
yeah.
knows? I think that provides an unpredictability, which provides good ratings for the NBA because everyone's going to want to tune in and see what the Hawks do at number one. And I think in the other scheme of things, look back, look at what we talked about earlier, how Boston got to this spot where they are now. They had to make this big move where they traded all their big players to get these draft picks, and then they eventually got these two guys. Again, they also got some help along the way because the teams above them didn't take the guys. And look where they are right now. They have Tatum, who a lot of people say is a top 15, top 10. I'm not.
Definitely top 5 to 10 player.
Yeah,
I
right.
wouldn't put him like that. That's the consensus.
I'm not ranking him. I'm just basing it off of what people say. They say he's a great player. Jaylen Brown really took a next step considering all the hate he got for being that being known as a one handball dominant player. Now he wins Finals MVP. That's another guy the Celtics got in the draft and was a guy that went to Cal, and not a lot of people really knew about him as often as a guy like Tatum maybe because Tatum went to Duke. So the Celtics got their way. They got these players, and it took a couple years to finally get the ball rolling, but they got their championship. And for one of these teams next week, maybe that becomes the case. And, we don't know how these players are going to develop at the end of the day, but all it takes is a couple years, and you make some good moves along the way, and you got a championship roster. And that's what Boston did this past season. And now we'll see if someone in this upcoming draft maybe kind of follows the mold that they've been building the last couple of years in Boston. Maybe someone does that. Who knows? Um, Before we wrap up the show, Johnson, any final thoughts about this NBA Finals and or maybe the draft next week?
Finals was a snooze fest, and the draft I'm excited for. Despite what everyone's saying that this is the worst draft class of all time, I think it has, dare I say, and this is going to sound asinine after this whole rant, potential, because that's what we base everything off of anyway in the
Right.
NBA. So
This is definitely
I'm looking forward
this
to
is
it.
definitely a potential draft, just because we don't really.
Every
Again,
draft's a potential
we
draft
don't.
again,
Right. Obviously.
and it's not nothing against you. Just I've seen
No.
this
No.
song and that's a
No.
million
I know.
times.
I'm just basing it. Like I said, it's what I said earlier. We don't know who the number one pick's going to be, so that's why anything is really, like you said earlier with Garnett. Anything's possible. Anything really is possible with the draft. We don't know who's going to take it number one. So I'm looking forward to it next week. I know you and I are definitely looking forward to another mock draft we have here on the All Gas No Break Sports Show. Another NBA mock draft that will be upcoming next week here on the show. We've kind of taken some of the storylines away from this NBA draft already, so kind of did us a little bit of a solid next week in terms of time left, Johnson, by drafting next week. So
I could talk 2 hours on the NBA draft next week, so we did everyone a favor.
Yeah, we definitely do that. We kind of went into some of the storylines as well with that draft. So we'll have to see. Remember, keep in mind, knowing us, Johnson, by the time we end this show, maybe there'll be some NBA news that we have going into next week's draft. There's still some teams searching for a head coach that are going into this draft. So we don't know what the hell they're doing going into next week in terms of that. But
certainly be interesting.
I'm sure we'll definitely talk about it next week on the show before we dive into the mock draft and seeing how many picks we get right. I think we got maybe 5 right last year. Maybe we'll try to improve that number.
It can be very hard, especially with how volatile this draft is going to be, because we have no idea what anyone's even thinking.
There's definitely going to be some trades. Yeah. I'm ready, though. I know you are, too. But that is going to do it for our final edition of this 2023-2024 NBA season on the All Gas No Break Sports Show. Next week, as Johnson and I mentioned, it is our mock draft here on the All Gas No Break Sports Show. We will try to pick and decipher who these teams will take in this upcoming NBA draft and see where their futures may lie ahead. But as a final note, congratulations once again to the Boston Celtics on winning their 18th NBA championship and cementing them as now having the most championships in NBA history. This has been Nicholas Pavona, joined alongside by Andrew Johnson with the All Gas No Break Sports Show. Have a great rest of your week.